you get a lot of people trying to pick a spot to call it alive, or a human, or in some of these cases a person with like full rights of a person.
Can this entity, this person or whatever you want to call it, exist autonomously and independently of the host, of the mother?
Why would you undo that? Why would you take that away? You're taking away the choice of women to have control of their own body.
It would be really awesome to see smokers, people who feel strongly about abortion, and gun rights advocates just all rallying together and like kicking the shit out of the system.
When it's your choice with something that's part of your body, that's different.
At what point do they have their own say? At what point does their self-ownership begin? Does it begin at birth? Does it begin when there's brain activity? Does it begin at some arbitrary line that we draw?
When the Church of Satan makes better Christian value arguments than Christianity, you got to stop and think, right?
I don't want to say conspiracy, but it kind of sounds like a little bit of a conspiracy right there.
Welcome to Kitchen Sink Microscopy, the home of controversy. And don't forget to stick around to the very end, because we write our own music, and you can head over to patreon.com/KSMVidcast and get it for yourself. I'm Casey Rochford.
And I'm Eric Rosenblatt. Thanks for joining us today. So, Casey, what do you got for us today? What's on your mind?
There's something that we just can't ignore, so we gotta like push out this episode like right in the middle of things. And I think you know what it is. It's these abortion laws that are coming out.
Yeah.
Alabama, Missouri, Georgia. I think Texas had something on their minds about trying to put people to death if they abort children. Like,
what?
That one's not even getting that much media attention anymore, so hopefully it got squashed. But
that's just crazy. Like, and kind of out of the blue too. Like, I noticed it just kind of, there's this flood.
It felt like one a day. Realistically, It was like maybe once a week or something, or every other week or so. But yeah, over the course of the last couple months, there's just been a flood of in Ohio.
What?
Ohio was one of them too.
I've only heard of like two of them. Of course, I don't really follow the news that much, so yeah, I mean,
well, and those are just the big ones. Like if you just do a Google search for states that are trying to crack down on abortion, it's a scary long list.
Well,
and, yeah,
I'm kind of wondering, like, where's this all coming from? And because how long has it been since Roe V Wade? It's
1973, so over 40 years.
Yeah, and really not much, at least not on this scale, has happened in that entire time. And now all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of states doing this. I don't want to say conspiracy, but it kind of sounds like a little bit of a conspiracy right there.
Well, I mean, with all the timing, not that I'm like a conspiratorial thinker per se, but I started thinking it seems like strangely timed to maybe draw attention away from this obstruction of justice thing with Trump. But
Well,
who's to
could it
say?
be? I've also heard that the whole Iran thing might have something to do with that, which I seriously hope we do not go to war with Iran. Like that is the stupidest thing we could do. We'll talk about war one of these days.
Yeah, basically throw a dart at all of Trump's ideas, and you could pick one to blame this on. Like, oh, they're trying to draw attention away from
Well,
that one.
you ever seen the movie Wag the Dog? I That's my recommendation for today. If you haven't seen it, watch it. You should. It's fiction, but well, I mean, it's based on truth, I guess, but it's a fictional story. It's well worth the watch. Anyway, so
Well, speaking of fiction, to get back to the point, there's a lot of fiction going around with respects to the fetus. Let's say that there's a few stages of development if we want to get technical. Like from conception, you've got blastocyst, zygote, embryo, and basically most people are focusing on the fetus. That's where most of the development is occurring. That's where you start seeing features that are somewhat recognizable, and you get a lot of people trying to pick a spot to call it alive, or a human, or in some of these cases a person with like full rights of a person.
yeah, I mean that I think that gets a little bit murky. People say alive and stuff. Well, all cells are alive. I think defining things in terms of whether it's a human person might be a better way to go, but then I don't know.
I mean, I yes, that all cells are alive is kind of, I mean, that's pretty close. I think the real definition we're talking about here is like a living organism. Let's just put the qualifier on it, one that's worthy of the rights that we grant to other people.
Yeah.
So as a biologist, I have to look at it like this. There's like a list of attributes that you kind of have to tick off in order to really consider something alive. One example of something that you might think is a living organism is a virus, and it's not. It's actually not alive.
Yeah, according to the definition.
Yeah, because it's incapable of this thing called homeostasis, where you can regulate your own autonomic functions on your own.
Yeah.
The virus depends on its host. Without its host, it will die very soon. And not that I'm likening a fetus to a virus or anything like that. Or
well, wait a minute. Why not? It is kind of like,
it's more like a parasite. If
parasite.
anything.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna say. That's not to belittle, a human life or a potential human life. That I think it's very special, but
no, it's
feeding off of the host.
Yeah, there's a symbiotic relationship, and the word parasite might have a negative connotation, but the denotation of it just means something that feeds off its host.
Yeah, there's a technical definition in that is kind of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
And so the point I'm trying to make there is Roe versus Wade kind of put this 2-trimester thing into play. I don't know that it was necessarily, born directly of that, but it seemed to come about as a result of Roe versus Wade, where we basically said, after the second trimester, since, a premature baby at this stage could theoretically survive and be okay, we're just not going to abort unless there's like threat to the mother.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that was hunky-dory for 46 years. And then all of a sudden, we've got people, we've always had people on, like using the religion angle and stuff like that, trying to say that life begins at conception. And there's a lot of conceptual problems with that. And mainly, a lot of these are Christian arguments. Mainly, if you go to the Bible, I think on no less than 11 occasions talks about the breath of life and breathing life into and all this stuff, where it's basically saying that life begins at birth. And that makes sense because Judaism, which Christianity was born from, and Islam, which came from Christianity and Judaism, both say, yes, life begins at birth.
That makes a little more sense.
It's in all those books.
Well, and I'll kind of like dig into this a little bit, because I've heard people say things about heartbeats and all this stuff, and I think, well, you can actually grow a heart and it'll beat. It doesn't require it doesn't have to be in a body. The heartbeat has nothing to do with it. I would go more into the brainwave side of things. Like if you have brain activity, then that kind of suggests that maybe you're thinking. Mm-hmm. Now, does that make you the same thing as a baby that's just been born? I don't know. And
there's not really any brain activity in the way that we define. Let's go to the other end of things. To characterize somebody as clinically dead, there's a loss of brain activity. Brain dead is the colloquial term. It's basically like you look at a fetus and you've got the same situation where, they're, I don't want to say brain dead because like the brain isn't even like fully developed yet. So it's not dead per se, but it's not yet ready to be out on its own.
Yeah, and I think the concept of autonomy is kind of important there. Like, can this entity, this person or whatever you want to call it, exist autonomously and independently of the host, of the mother? Okay, we have some technology now that allows we can go a lot further down, but then I don't know.
Well, that depends on your definition of autonomy. Like, does a 2-year-old have autonomy?
Well, and that's a good point. And I think it has more to do with the fact that somebody is this being is inside of somebody and continuously dependent on the mother. So resources, nutrients and whatever going into their body to keep them alive moment to moment. If you cut that umbilical cord inside of an expectant mother, the child will die like nearly instantaneously. That doesn't happen in the wild. Like you don't still have that. So you're a little bit more, and because you could make the same argument about you and I. Like, well, if we lost our jobs today, and we had no food and no money, like, are we autonomous? Well, I don't know. So you got to draw some kind of line at some point.
Well, I'm thinking of autonomy in the like bioethics standard of like, can a person make sound decisions for their own well-being?
Well, and that happens a lot later though. Like a 2-year-old can't do that.
Right, that's my point. So like if we're not legally giving autonomy to people until they're 18 years old, why the hell are we like treating a fetus as though it's going to be like, oh, hey, I don't want to die, like.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not just 18 now; it's like 21 or 25 in some situations,
It
depending on
depends on the
what you're.
situation.
Yeah, and that's something I wrestle with a lot. So I'll just kind of like outline sort of how I feel about it, because I think this is probably a good time to do it. I believe very much in self-ownership, the principle of self-ownership, that you own yourself, you dictate 100% what goes into your body, what goes out of it, what you do with it, all of that kind of thing. And so, of course, somebody can decide if they have a child inside them, they can abort that child. Of course.
And for all intents and purposes, that child is part of that person.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're like you said, they're kind of like a parasite. Not to, I wish there was a better word, but it is sort of like a parasite. But then it's like, well, what about that life that's inside that person? Like, at what point did they have their own say? At what point does their self-ownership begin? Does it begin at birth? Does it begin when there's brain activity? Does it begin at some arbitrary line that we draw because we just don't know? And that's the thing. I completely believe that people should be able to make those decisions. I think it's awful. Like, it's kind of probably the hardest decision you should ever have to make, to carry out an abortion, or
absolutely. It's no light matter. I don't think nobody's doing it for shits and giggles.
Some people are that, but they're the ones, they get the most media attention. But
about your comment of self-ownership, I think that's a huge philosophical discussion that we should probably do a whole show on, because it really boils down to, I mean, it's kind of a man-made idea, this concept of self-ownership. I don't.
Well, who better to make it than the ones who are subject to it, right?
Right. But I don't think it's necessarily anything that you can stamp a date on and say, oh, you are now qualified for autonomy. Like,
no, and I don't think you can. And the thing is, with developing fetuses, I think it's sort of the same thing with the disabled, especially mentally disabled and things like that. Like, we have a duty to take care of people. Now, that's the thing. Like, I wrestle with this idea and I think about it a lot, because there's a lot of conflicting ideas going on right there. But I always come back to the idea that it should be a choice that the mother makes, or a couple makes together, whatever the case may be. That is who should decide, not the state, not some church, no religion. Nobody like that should decide. Because they're not the ones carrying the baby. It's the person who actually is. Those are the ones who have to make the decision. And yeah, it's going to be hard. And it's probably, it may not even be the right decision, but it's what decision you can make at the time. And we shouldn't judge them for it. Especially, we should definitely not put them in jail, put them in a cage, or kill them. Because are we morally superior to those people? Like, how can you possibly claim moral superiority in that case? Prove it to me that you're morally superior, and I might possibly believe you. If you can't, then get out and let people make decisions for themselves. I that's sort of where I land at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry to me. Yeah. Like, this is a developing entity that is pretty much one with your body. I think, I don't know, like there's probably legal precedence somewhere that you should have ownership of things that are attached to your body, you know?
Well,
Like,
yeah, exactly.
I think there should be a way to like legally draw it out. Like this is obviously up to the person whose body it's taking place in.
Yeah, and I'd rather avoid the legal side of things and rather go into the conceptual and philosophical side of things. But you're totally right there. That oh man, there's so many. This is a huge subject.
Yeah.
There's like so many angles going on right here.
And I just want to say, I can put myself in the shoes of people on the other side of this, because it's not easy. I mean, what you're doing is you're ending the possibility of a human life. And the word possibility is key in that phrase. You're not ending a life.
Well, it's a life, but is it a human?
It's not. It doesn't have full homeostatic capabilities.
The thing is, every cell in that organism is alive.
But if you, well, here's what I'm trying to say. If you remove the fetus at, I don't know, let's say 16 weeks, roughly 4 months into a pregnancy, is there any hope that it will survive, even with intervention?
No, probably not.
No, absolutely not. Like, not enough development has occurred at that point.
Yeah, and that's where what I meant by the autonomy side of things.
Now, even in the third trimester, though they are considered viable, you're already talking about like a big maybe. Like, not every premature child makes it through the NICU. It's not an easy thing to go through. I have a friend that's kind of facing that right now, and it's so what I'm trying to get at there is this premature child, while they have a possibility of living, the probability is a lot lower.
Yeah.
And when you cross that line of viability, the possibility of life still exists, but the probability is at zero. Like, in that moment. Like, that has to be what we're considering, is what is in the moment, not what could be. Because who's to say that this woman that wants an abortion today at 16 weeks, if she's denied it, there's nothing stopping her body from spontaneously aborting at 17 weeks and miscarrying.
That's true. That's true.
You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to come.
And really, if you want to think about it logically, you have to deal with actuality, not probabilities or possibilities. Like,
exactly.
Just because I want to be an astronaut, and I do, by the way, doesn't mean that I am an astronaut. I'm an astronaut when I get in a rocket and I go up into space. That's the point that I become an astronaut.
Yeah.
Until then, it's just a dream.
Yep.
So,
and yeah, even if you're in school to be an astronaut, you might not finish. So you can't go around saying I'm an astronaut. You know.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really hard to get people who don't have a full understanding of biology and developmental biology, which is really tough to wrap your head around, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
There's a lot of things to know.
Sure. And now here's the thing, though. Consider that most people don't have that experience, that understanding. and they're coming from a religious standpoint or something like that, like, what is the response to that? Because yeah, you're right. It is, it, by and large, there's a religious component to the anti-abortion movement, and I think that's something that should be responded to.
Yeah, it's always hard to get into an argument with religion because there's no way for either side to win, really.
Yeah.
When you pull uh, religion into anything, uh, which, by the way, shouldn't be happening here in America with our laws at all.
No, that's very true. I
Uh,
mean,
when you start doing that, like you've got people on one side saying God will smite us if we kill this unborn baby, and you have the other side saying no, like God's not real, like we're real, and this is a human being's life, that two lives that you are potentially ruining with your forced morality, let's say. You
yeah,
know, pushing your morality on other people is always wrong.
it
it's
is.
it's
Yeah.
it's an individual choice that we all have to make for ourselves, going back to the autonomy and self-ownership thing. You know, we pick what's right and wrong, and yeah, we have social mores and things like that that guide our laws, what people generally agree on as far
That,
as right and wrong.
that's called natural law. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you get into this religion thing, that's where it muddies the waters, because it's tautological. It just goes round and around in circles, and you get nowhere.
That's true. But I'd like to see some kind of resolution, I guess, to this in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would shock people to know that, um, the body spontaneously aborts before you even know you're pregnant. It spontaneously aborts a lot of potential human beings.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's actually like it's not that hard for sperm to penetrate the egg and fertilize it.
Hmm.
In the scheme of things, there's actually a lot of that going on. So if that's where you define life beginning, um, well, you can't really, because the development absolutely will not go past a certain stage unless that then attaches to the uterine wall, and that is the hard part. Like,
Yeah. Now, here's the thing, though. You're speaking logic, and in a
yeah,
religion sense, there is, well, there might be some logic, but there's, in the analysis of one's own beliefs, they're generally, it's absent.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's a logic in that there's a structure to their thinking, but
yeah.
the structure doesn't always jive with. No, you know what? I'm not even going to try to call it logic. I'm not going to be apologetic about it. It's not logical at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay. Well, we have a whole series on religion that we're doing, so we'll go into that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, this is I the thing is, like, what bothers me the most is people who believe a certain way are telling other people what to do. And it's not, the thing is, it's not like they're just standing on the street with signs saying, don't do this. There are guys with guns coming to people's houses or arresting people, putting them in cages, killing them. There's talk of killing people. And well, it's like, well, okay, wait, is that the right thing to do if somebody does this? Like, you're going to kill somebody because they did this? It yeah, I don't.
yeah, and I don't know how any woman could actually go for a law like that, but it's staggering. It baffles the mind that in Alabama, this was signed by, I think the governor is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's an older woman, and granted her uterus dried up years ago, so it doesn't affect her one way or the other.
Well, and we're also dealing with a different era of thinking too, so that's a thought.
Yeah, but it's like, how can you like take away the rights of your fellow women? Like,
Well,
you've gone through so much to propel yourselves in society since like the 1960s and all, the women's movement and stuff. There have been massive strides in getting equality and things like that put into the infrastructure of our society. And why would you undo that? Why would you take that away? You're taking away the choice of women to have control of their own body.
yeah, and now some people argue it's not just your body; it's two bodies, um, and there are those who would argue that killing a fetus is murder. And the thing
Well,
is, that's the thing. Like, I look at that and I'm like, I can understand where they're coming from, but I don't have the moral position, I guess, to claim any authority in that regard. So I can't possibly judge them. And how can anybody else? So,
even
yeah,
if even if you want to call it murder, there's always a Sophie's choice that comes up. There's always a situation where you have to make a decision that will end a life. Like, it's
yeah.
unfortunate, but these things do happen. And
Being a soldier or something like that.
yeah, or the classic, you're on a train and there's one person tied to the tracks over here and three people tied to the tracks over here. Which way do you divert the train? You're
Yeah,
gonna kill someone either way.
that exactly. And my answer to that is the universe set things up that way, so I will touch nothing. I wash my hands of that situation. Yeah, but that's an interesting moral dilemma. It, I just, yeah, man, there's so many things I want to say, and I don't know that we can encapsulate it in a tiny little episode. Well, nothing we do is tiny, so
Yeah, I think this one could go as long as it takes, because it's really important.
yeah, I
And
agree.
now these things may or may not get past the Supreme Court. It's hard to say with the state of the federal government right now.
Well, and I've heard actually that these laws, wherever they're coming from, there's no intent to actually ban things in these states, abortion in these states. The point is to challenge Roe v. Wade, and in doing so, undo it. Now, my thought on that is, well, the cat's out of the bag. Like, how can you possibly unwind more time than I've been alive? Like, as long as I've been alive, that's been a thing, and it's been okay.
Yeah,
Maybe not morally, like, different people believe different things, but legally and maybe somewhat ethically, it's been okay. And it's a precedent that's existed for that long. So how are you going to unwind that? Like, yeah, you can
I think
pass laws today saying you can't do something, but it's never going to change people's desires because, think about it this way. Okay, maybe not Washington State. Well, okay, yeah, marijuana has been legal now for quite a while, a little while in Washington State. What if they banned it tomorrow? Are people going to be like, well, I guess it's illegal? No, you've had a taste of it. It's legal. and it was fine. And then
I
some
think all those people
asshole.
had a taste of it before it was legal too.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I mean, you know, in a legal sense. And then some asshole comes along and says, well, no, okay, actually, we were wrong. It's not legal. Well, that's not going to fly. And I don't think it will in this case. Like, yeah, okay, go ahead. Undo Roe v. Wade. Do it. Ban it. Ban everything. But it'll create a backlash like no one has ever seen. Because we've had it for our whole lives. Us adults, like, you know, my contemporaries, it's been around that long, and we're not going to just sit down and accept it. So, yeah. There's that.
And I think you touched on something pretty important. They're not trying to outright ban it, but what they are doing is making it impossible to do safely, and that's effectively banning it. Like, to give an example, I mean, it's not apples to apples, but you know, a lot of states, like Washington included, a while back started banning smoking indoors. Okay, kind of makes sense. Then you couldn't smoke within 25 feet of a door or a window, so you'd have to stand in the middle of traffic effectively.
Yeah.
You couldn't discard your cigarette butts, and then they made ashtrays be kind of like a dinosaur. Like, you used to see ashtrays everywhere. So effectively, well, and then there's the taxes that they put on it. So they're doing everything they can to basically make it that you can't smoke, but they're not saying, well, you can't smoke.
Yeah, the same thing goes with gun laws. Gun laws are the same way too. You know, it's the same, and it would be really awesome to see smokers, people who feel strongly about abortion, and gun rights advocates just all rallying together and like kicking the shit out of the system. That'd be cool. But one can dream. I don't know. Yeah, oh man, this is, well, yeah, we'll keep going. I mean, we're like a half hour in, but there's so many things. This is the thing. This is not a light topic. This isn't like we're talking about you know, moon landing hoaxes or something like that, or flat earthers.
Yeah,
it's a big deal. It's a big deal to a lot of people on both sides, on all sides. So it's worthy of a good, deep discussion.
Yeah, just to circle around to the beginning, you know, when we were talking about there's certain fictions surrounding this, you know, there's fiction on both sides. I think there's a lot of people who are under the impression that the mother will be jailed, and I don't think any. I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure all of that is directed towards the doctors performing the abortions.
That's what I've heard too.
But you know, I wouldn't be surprised if, like I said earlier, I think Texas was trying to get the death penalty for mothers that had an abortion. But I mean, that kind of like got swept under the rug. Like, I haven't heard about it. So I don't know if it just kind of fell to dust or whatever, but
probably, because that's ridiculous. Like,
yeah, well, it's ridiculous that an abortion doctor would get 99 years. I mean, 99 years is very specific. You don't get parole for that like you do with life. Life is like, it could be 25 years. It could be until you die.
Well, and that's the thing. Like,
99 years is very much 99 years.
And the fact is, I could walk out into the street. Not that I would, because I would never do anything like this. But I could just walk out into the street, find the nearest passerby, point a gun at him, and execute them. Bam! Just kill him. Shoot him in the head. And I might get like 10 to 20 years. But 99 years for performing a medical procedure that has a lot of gray area, like, it's
even
not as cut and dried as
the mother's life.
bullet in somebody's head. Like, that is very different. Now, yeah.
Yeah, it's even if it's to save the mother's life, they would give the doctor 99 years. This is basically saying that the Good Samaritan law is total bullshit, because it's exactly like apples to apples. It would be like if you drew your gun and shot somebody who was trying to mug an old lady at gunpoint. You shot him and killed him and saved her life. Then you go to jail for killing that guy.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
That's exactly what this is doing.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Oh man, it drives me crazy when people try to dictate to other people what to do with their lives. Now, and I get if you feel like that abortion is murder, or that there's like a human being in there, which there is. I mean, I kind of wrestle with that thing, but I would never tell anybody what to do. I do not have I'm not sitting on a pedestal of moral authority to be able to tell anybody what to do in that regard. So that's what you have to do. You have to do it, and you have to live with that, the consequences of what you do. And that's your own thing. Now, as soon as it's a human that's outside and can walk around or is autonomous, like, well, things change a little bit. But in other situations, I mean,
yeah, it is a little blurry. I mean, like I said, I err on the side of the biological definition of life. But that said, I would fully support trying someone for murder if they took a baseball bat and beat a pregnant woman in the stomach over and over again.
Oh yeah, because that's not voluntary. She didn't
exactly
for that.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. And like when it's your choice with something that's part of your body, that's different. I mean, we've talked about suicide and the concept of assisted suicide before. Like, you could basically call it some form of suicide, like you're killing off a part of you. Because reason.
That's a really good way to put it. And I would add too that this is the thing. Going back to self-ownership, the baby is not property of the state, and it's not property of you and I, somebody who is carrying a child. It's the creation of the mother and father. It's theirs. And that's kind of an important distinction to make. How can you tell somebody what to do when it's their creation? Like, they were the ones that did all that. They're the ones that are carrying the child, or, well, the mother is probably, but, well, the father might be doing some stuff, but still.
Yeah, and I mean, the father's DNA does make up half of this child, while they're not bearing the burdens of gestation. They absolutely ought to have a say, but not the final word, of course. You know,
well, because
but I think they should be considered. I mean, except, you know, rape or incest or all that stuff.
Well,
but
of course, yeah. And actually, that's a really good point. And we'll have to talk about fathers' rights and things like that at some point, because that's a pretty good topic to talk about.
But they're not at the focal point of this. So
no, not at all.
In fact, like, why not? Because they are, like, if you're going to call a mother who has her child aborted a murderer, is the man accessory? Like,
oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
If you agree
to
it.
I think it's a little silly to give a fetus personhood. I mean, to be a citizen, you have to be born in the U.S. or, you know, take a test. or
Mhm.
something. But and now if you're a clump of rapidly developing cells, um, now you're a person. I mean, I guess corporations are people too now, but
We'll talk about that another day. Yeah, and okay,
yeah.
I want to ask you actually, because I've been thinking about this. As a biologist, where where is the threshold between just a bunch of cells dividing and a thinking sentient being begin in terms of a fetus developing? You're a
Ooh.
biologist now. I am not. Probably nobody watching is. So you're the authority now. When does it start?
Ah, man. I feel like I was just handed the most important decision in the world. Uh, uh, okay. So, sentience and autonomy. Here's the thing. Unlike some creatures on this earth, humans are born incomplete. Our development is not complete yet. We don't plop out and take our first steps. You know, we're still very much creating a lot of important pathways neurologically that control things. There's a reason that nobody has memories of being in the womb or being very young. Like a lot of people, I think maybe the earliest I've heard of is like a first birthday, but some of that is arguable because you could just be like piecing it together from photographs. So it's really hard to say where sentience actually starts coming into play. Like the brain doesn't actually stop developing until you're like around 25, maybe a
Yeah.
little older.
Yeah, and now I remember things from when I was very young, like single digits. But that's a good point. Um, and I would argue to people who want to dictate to others what to do, prove when sentience begins.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to claim sentience is based solely on the ability to create memories, because then people with amnesia wouldn't be sentient. Like
No, it's
it
like
crosses lines.
it's a cognitive thing, like being able to reason and understand things and whatnot. But well, I mean that's a bigger topic than we have time for today, probably. But
Yeah.
this is my point. It it's very gray, but yet there's a bunch of people that treat it as black and white. Like this is when things begin, this is when they end. It's it's right here, and I don't think it's that way. But yet
No,
the
it is way
the
more complicated.
but yet the force of arms is applied against people because of laws based on those flawed ideas that we know better than you how to live your life, what life is. And yet uh, yeah, that's the thing, like there's these people making decisions that are life and death for people, um and they don't know the first thing about it. They can't prove it. There's no information. um and so I would say, well, why would we defer to their, I don't want to say expertise, I'll say legal authority? Just a thought.
So here's my final answer as a scientist. When you're faced with a huge hypothetical dilemma, uh, I always like to apply the scientific method and critical thinking, and the part of that includes something called the null hypothesis. So if you're unable to prove your hypothesis beyond a reasonable reasonable doubt, you have to accept the null. So in this case, we're trying to prove when something is alive. If we can't all agree on that, we have to assume it is not alive. The null hypothesis. Like, that is the assumption we need to go on if there's not like a huge consensus that yes, it is alive at point X.
Well, and I would ask the question to anybody, any doubter, what is life?
Yeah.
What is even a human?
Yeah.
You know,
but I would be shocked to find anyone that says a newborn baby isn't alive, or a human or a person. You know, like, I think that passes that null hypothesis, and yeah, like 99.9999% of people are going to say yes, that baby is alive.
Sure,
we can agree on that.
Yeah.
And then, when you get into that third trimester, I think there's still the ability to go beyond that null hypothesis. So the way we've been doing things, I think, has been just fine, but we have this political climate right now where there's a religious sect that is in the majority now, and they're trying to like get that into the legislation, and they always do this with religious born ideas. They try to craft it in such a way that doesn't really sound religious, but you know where it's coming from. And like I said earlier, I think that's really the problem that it boils down to, because you can't argue with these people. There's no winning for either of you.
Well, and why would you want to win? Wouldn't the goal be finding the truth? I do, but maybe I'm in a minority.
I mean, what is the truth? I mean,
well, yeah, that we'll have to do an episode about that, actually. Yeah, that is, man, that we're like coming up on 50 minutes on this episode. That is a lot of time.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't even really like discussed this in depth enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more I wanted to talk about. Like, there's people claiming, well, look at New York. They're making it legal to abort a baby like right up until birth and even a few minutes after. And that's not true at all. Basically, all they did was like augments Roe versus Wade, which allowed for third trimester abortions that endangered the life of the mother. It now includes third trimester abortions for non-viable fetuses.
Yeah.
Fetuses. So that's really all it did. There was some other obscure weirdness, like it decriminalized beating a woman and killing the baby or something like that. I didn't get into it deeply. Yeah, I don't know.
That's crazy.
Law, man.
The thing is, people have their own views on things, and they'll twist whatever data they can acquire to accommodate those views. And that's what I say about trying to aim for truth, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. You can't possibly get perfect truth. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. And the reason we separate church and state is because, you'll run in circles forever if you try to legislate based on religion. Case in point, this was another thing I wanted to bring up. The Church of Satan is suing Missouri, I think, for infringement on their religious beliefs, which are that, like we've said, the fetus is part of the woman. It's part of her body. It is her autonomous choice whether or not she wants to abort. And the laws currently being pushed in Missouri are going against that. And that's the teachings of the Church of Satan. When the Church of Satan makes better Christian value arguments than Christianity, you got to stop and think, right?
That is ponderous. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I kind of see it as like a fuzzy logic kind of thing. Like you like you said, the most people would agree that a baby that's born is a human life deserving of protection. And then I think most people would say the first cell division, when the sperm inseminates the egg, that is not a human life. I think the vast majority of people would say that. So everything in between is a gradient. And so where does life begin? I don't know that we know that, because we can't even define it. In order to claim that you have the answer, you have to understand the definition of things. And we don't even, I mean, you're a biologist, and I just asked you that, and you know, it was kind of like, I don't know. So if a biologist doesn't know the exact time, how can anybody else? How can you, as a person sitting in your house right now, know that answer for sure? And how can somebody who's signing a law know that answer? I don't think they can. And so to defer to them as the authority on those is kind of ridiculous. Like, that's I guess that's where I stand on it. Like, I don't know, and because I don't know, I'm not going to pass judgment on anybody. And I certainly won't put him in a cage or point guns at him or kill him over that. That just seems ridiculous.
Yeah. So what you said about most people agreeing that sperm and an egg coming together isn't life.
Not life. No, sorry. I want to qualify, or qualify that the human life.
Right.
Yeah, cells. If you scrape skin cells off your body, that we wouldn't say, well, that's a human. You shouldn't kill those cells. But yeah, I mean, like a person.
Yeah, you could clone a man from dandruff.
I'm not going to quote Red Dwarf.
Where I was going with that, though, is there's no legislation right now going after fertilization clinics or anything like that, where they're creating embryos or test tube babies or whatever, because they're like, oh, well, it's not in the woman, so so now they're trying to define life as, I guess, being inside the woman and being conceived. But rewind to 20 years ago or so, where we started really looking at the possibility of stem cells. Oh, geez, you can't take this blastocyst that's not even implanted in the uterus yet and take the cells from it, because that's killing a human life. Well, which one is it?
Yeah, that's a good point. And stem cells have been used to do some pretty miraculous things. Like,
I'm alive because of stem cells.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
we should probably do an episode on that crap that I went through.
I'm very happy for that, by the way. So yeah. Oh, so we're coming up on an hour now that we've talked about this. We should probably we'll probably wrap it up. Not that this is going to be anywhere near complete, because I mean, we think about this. In an hour, we have only talked about like a couple things.
Yeah, we only just started talking about how this is kind of like an affront to women. Like, it's kind of well, not even kind of. It's a very sexist legislation.
Well, yeah,
and we really didn't even talk about that.
I don't know that all of the legislation or all of those things have a sexist origin, but I mean, people perceive it that way. Now, yeah, okay, all right.
There's a lot of people trying to say it's racist, but I think that's just crowbarring some other problem into this. Like,
Yeah,
come on.
I don't see how. I mean, well, I wouldn't be surprised. It's possible that there's some racism in there, but I think it comes down to
everybody.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think people perceive things the way they do based on their experiences, and the people passing these laws have their own thoughts about things that are independent of that. That doesn't make them justified by any means, but I think this is a conversation that really, really needs to be had, because it's huge. Like, this is probably one of the biggest conversations that you could possibly have, right up there with suicide. And you're completely right in bringing up suicide and being connected to this, because it's kind of similar.
Yeah, so, and that's certainly not a light decision for anyone.
No, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think it should be. Nobody should be treating this like it's just some kind of, just something you're doing, like you're going to the store and buying a toilet plunger. Like, this is a big deal. I mean, yeah, there is a potential human life. There is something living inside of you. Like, that's kind of a big deal. But by the same token, like, we can't tell people not to do it. I mean, you can like make the argument, but when it comes to laws and things like that, I don't think those things apply, because that's a moral issue. And I mean, again, not being able to create a concrete definition of when a human life actually begins does make that a little bit gray. It's like a lot of other things where like age of consent or the drinking age or things like that. Well, it's different for different people. Like, you
yeah, like maturity is not like, a flip of a switch at the age of whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, can you say, oh yeah, you've turned 18 and now you can all of a sudden sign up for the military and go and kill and die? I don't know. Because I know people who are over 50 that can't even budget properly. Like, so I don't know, they could make that decision, that because yeah, paying bills is one thing, but dying is a completely different thing. And so I don't think things are as black and white as people think they are. And that's kind of what I'm getting at here, that it's a sliding scale. And when it's something like that, you can't look at it through a black and white lens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for all the comments on this. There's so many things we missed, and it's not that we were ignoring them. It's just we've got an hour, and
yeah, and the thing is, we don't want to like treat this lightly. I think it can't be like, oh well, it's you just mention a thing and say a couple sentences and you're done. Like, no, this is complex. And so
so
what this is,
like, yeah, try not to have the comments be like, you're killing babies.
Yeah.
Put some thought into it.
No, exactly. This is an initiation of a conversation. This is the beginning, the genesis of something. And so depending on what people say, we're gonna follow up on it. We may take like a couple points or two and do that as an episode. But again, this is huge. So we said what we could
Yeah.
say, given the time we had, and you know, we've gone way over what we would normally do, but I think it's worth it for everybody, for whatever side you're in, whatever camp you follow. It's definitely worth it.
And yeah, definitely please comment. We will definitely do a show based on some thoughtful comments, either side of the argument. And you know, who knows, we might even invite you on the show if we think you've got something really poignant to say, and a really good strong argument, one way or the other. We want to hear all the sides of this, and really kind of dive in and try to understand everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. And absolutely keep the conversation civil. Like, because of the gravity of this topic, don't resort to ad hominem. Don't resort to bullshittery or anything like that. Like, have a civil conversation, because that's the way you arrive at the truth. And I hope everybody maintains that.
Yeah. And I don't know, we should probably wrap up.
Yeah.
But you know, we made a lot of mentions about religion. Just want to call out to the viewers. We do have kind of a series on religion, and we're always looking for guests to, you know, come on and tell us about their religion. We're not looking to have an argument. We want to actually like dive in and figure out what there is to know, dispel some myths, common misconceptions, and things like that. So if you or someone you know would be willing to come on and talk about Buddhism or being a Sikh, or, you know, Islam or Judaism or Shinto, or, you know, the list goes on, you know.
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about. Yeah, we're always looking for people to talk to in that regard. Yeah, oh, man, I still feel like we like, I feel like we just began the conversation. There's so many layers going on here, but that's good, because we don't want to overwhelm people with too much information, and I don't think we're going to find the answer in an hour or something like that. So by all means, keep the conversation. Yeah, keep the conversation going. Be civil to each other. There's no reason to get angry. And thanks for deep sink diving with us.
Enjoy the music on the way out.
And have a great day. Have a great day, everybody.
Or good morning.
That's what they say when a girl is raped. That's what they say when the girl dies.